You probably think I sound crazy. Everyone does. But tonight was the final straw. I know something is following me, and it isn't something from this world. My mom always warned me. The more you watch those darn scary shows, the more you open yourself up to the devil. I can still hear her voice nagging me every time I turn on something spooky. Let me back up a bit. I've always loved the paranormal. Ever since I was a kid, I'd spend hours in the school library, hunched over those ancient computers, searching for any book about ghosts. My mom, a devout Southern Baptist, wasn't thrilled. She believed all ghosts were demons sent by Satan to torment us. I never bought into the hellfire and brimstone, but I did believe in an afterlife. I just never considered what would happen if I actually encountered one. It all started when I was 12. We moved into this old house, built in the 1980s. It still had all the original woodwork and doorknobs, except for the renovated kitchen. It was a one-story house with a massive bonus room upstairs, and get this, a door that led to the attic. It was the stuff of nightmares for any kid. My sister and I were thrilled to share that bonus room, tucked away from the rest of the house. But soon after we settled in, things started getting weird. My mom was strict about two things: church every Sunday and turning off lights when leaving a room. I was a forgetful kid, so I broke that second rule a lot. After countless scoldings, a horror story in itself, my subconscious started turning off lights automatically. That's how I knew something paranormal was happening. One Sunday morning, my sister and I were heading downstairs for church. She'd forgotten to turn off her bedside lamp, so she ran back and switched it off. But when we got back from church, my dad pulled into the driveway, and we could all see the lamp was on. My mom gave us an earful, but my sister and I exchanged confused glances. We knew we'd turned it off. After that, things were quiet for a while. Then one night, I was in the shower when the bathroom light suddenly turned on. I wasn't scared, oddly enough. I just stepped out, flipped the switch, and continued showering. I read about setting boundaries with spirits, and I felt a weird sense of accomplishment when it actually worked. Fast forward 2 years. I was 14 and desperate for my own space. So my parents converted the downstairs office into my bedroom. That's when things got really dark. Years later, my dad admitted he'd always felt a dark presence in that office, but he'd kept it to himself. I wanted to paint the walls black, but my mom refused. Probably thought I'd join a goth band or something. So we settled for navy blue, with the trees blocking the window. My room was always dim. At first, I didn't mind. I was hardly ever in there anyway, usually glued to the TV watching ghost hunting shows. But soon, I had a different reason for avoiding my room. I could feel the presence, and it was unsettling. I started having horrific nightmares, the kind that would make your skin crawl. I told my mom, but she blamed it on the scary shows. My sister, who never cared about the paranormal, just brushed me off. Then my stuff started disappearing. First, it was small things like hair ties and pencils. Then it escalated to jewelry and clothes. The weirdest part? The missing items would reappear a day or two later in the most obvious spots, as if mocking me. When I was 16, We moved again, and the experiences stopped. I went to college, made friends, and put it all behind me. Or so I thought. A year ago, it came back. My family had moved again, this time closer to my college. They gave me a room in their new house, and I'd often stay over. One night, after a visit, my dad drove me back to my dorm. He stopped to pee outside, and when he got back in the car, he told me I'd left my light on. My blood ran cold. I knew I hadn't. It was a ghost saying hello. The drive back was silent. I thought I was done with the paranormal, but it had followed me. It even showed itself in my dorm room one night, a dark figure looming behind me while I watched a video. I freaked out, ran out of the room, and didn't go back until my roommate returned. After that, things were quiet again, until tonight. It's been almost a year since that figure appeared. I was hanging out with friends, having a few drinks, when I noticed one of my necklaces, a thin metal choker, was missing. I panicked, searched everywhere, and then it hit me. I remembered it feeling tight on my neck just an hour earlier. How could it just vanish? I found it on my bed, right next to my phone. It was a ghost, toying with me. It had escalated from moving objects to taking something off my neck. I'm terrified of what it might do next. And yes, maybe my mom is right. Maybe I should lay off the scary shows. The next morning, I woke up with a start. The events of the previous night replayed in my mind, sending chills down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The necklace incident wasn't just a random prank. It felt like a deliberate escalation, a sinister message from the entity that had been haunting me for years. I decided to confide in my best friend, Sarah. She was the only one who wouldn't dismiss my experiences as mere imagination or overactive imagination fueled by horror movies. As I recounted the events, her eyes widened in disbelief, but I could see a flicker of concern in them. "This is serious, Emily," she said, her voice hushed. "This isn't just about missing objects anymore. It's messing with you directly now." "I know," I whispered, feeling a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. "But what can I do? I don't even know what it wants." Sarah pondered for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "Maybe we should try to find out more about it," she suggested. "Research the history of the houses you've lived in. See if there's any connection, any clue as to why it's attached to you." It was a good idea. Maybe there was something in the past, some unresolved event or lingering energy, that was causing this entity to latch onto me. We spent the rest of the day scouring online archives, historical records, and local news reports, searching for any mention of paranormal activity or unexplained events related to the houses I'd lived in. As we delved deeper into our investigation, we stumbled upon a chilling discovery. A news article from the 1980s detailed a tragic incident that had occurred in the first house where I'd encountered the entity. A young boy, around my age, had mysteriously disappeared from his bedroom one night, never to be seen again. The article mentioned strange occurrences leading up to his disappearance, including objects moving on their own and flickering lights. A wave of dread washed over me. Could this missing boy be the entity that was haunting me? Was it trying to communicate something? Or was it seeking something more sinister? The mystery deepened, and the fear that had been simmering within me now flared into a full-blown panic. That night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I noticed a strange flicker in the mirror across the room. I squinted, trying to make out the reflection in the dim light. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just my own anxious face staring back at me. But then, as I blinked, I noticed a shadow lurking behind me, a dark silhouette that seemed to blend into the darkness of the room. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow moved, its edges rippling like smoke, and I realized with horror that it was reaching towards me, its long, slender fingers stretching out from the mirror. The shadow's touch sent a jolt of icy terror through me. I recoiled, scrambling back against the headboard, my eyes wide with fear. The shadow retreated, its form flickering and distorting like a flame in the wind. I watched, paralyzed with terror, as it slowly solidified, taking on a more defined shape. It was a boy, no older than 10, with pale skin, dark eyes, and a mop of unruly brown hair. He wore a faded blue shirt and jeans, his clothes slightly tattered and worn. His expression was a mixture of sadness and anger, his eyes filled with a deep longing that sent shivers down my spine. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The boy didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes boring into mine, as if searching for something deep within my soul. Then he slowly raised his hand, pointing a finger towards me. "You," he rasped, his voice a chilling whisper that seemed to echo through the room. "You can see me." I nodded, unable to speak, my throat constricted with fear. "You're like me," he continued, his voice growing stronger. Trapped, a wave of confusion washed over me. Trapped? What did he mean? Was he the missing boy from the news article? The one who had vanished from this very house all those years ago? Are you the boy who disappeared?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. The boy nodded slowly. "They never found me," he whispered. "They never will." He took a step closer, his form flickering as he moved. I shrank back against the headboard, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I need your help." "Help," I echoed, my mind reeling. "How can I help you?" The boy's eyes filled with a desperate plea. "I need you to find me," he whispered. "Find my body." A chill ran down my spine. His body. Was he buried somewhere in this house? Hidden away in some forgotten corner? But how? I stammered, my voice barely audible. The boy's form began to fade, his voice growing weaker. "The attic," he whispered, his words barely discernible. "The attic." Then he vanished, leaving me alone in the darkness, my mind filled with questions and my heart pounding with fear. The boy's plea echoed in my mind. The attic, find my body. A wave of dread washed over me. The attic, that dark, forbidding space had always been a source of fear, even in daylight. Now, the thought of venturing into its depths alone in the dead of night sent shivers down my spine. But I couldn't ignore the boy's desperate plea. He was trapped, his spirit bound to this house, unable to find peace, and I, somehow, was the key to his release. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the task ahead. I grabbed my phone, its flashlight the only source of light in the oppressive darkness, and crept towards the attic door. The old wooden door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, revealing a steep, narrow staircase leading into the shadows above. The air in the attic was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Cobwebs clung to the rafters, and shadows danced in the dim light of my phone. I moved cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest, scanning the cluttered space for any sign of the boy's remains. Old furniture, discarded toys, and boxes filled with forgotten belongings lined the walls. I navigated through the maze of objects, my anxiety growing with each step. The silence was broken only by the creaking floorboards beneath my feet and the occasional scuttling sound of unseen creatures. Then I saw it, a small wooden chest tucked away in a corner, partially hidden behind a stack of old books. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached for the chest, a cold gust of wind swept through the attic, extinguishing the light from my phone. I fumbled for the switch, my fingers trembling, and finally managed to turn the light back on. As I shone the light on the chest, I noticed a small, faded inscription on its lid. Thomas, Thomas, the missing boy's name. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid of the chest. Inside, nestled amongst faded photographs and old toys, lay a small, child-sized skeleton. The bones were fragile, almost brittle, but they were unmistakably human. A wave of sadness washed over me. This was Thomas, the boy who had vanished all those years ago. He had been here all along, hidden away in this forgotten attic, his spirit unable to find peace. I carefully gathered the remains, wrapping them in a soft cloth I found in the chest. As I held the bundle in my arms, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace. Thomas could finally rest. Clutching the small bundle containing Thomas's remains, I made my way back down the steep attic stairs, my heart heavy with a mix of sadness and relief. The darkness seemed to press in on me, but the faint light from my phone guided my way. Back in my room, I carefully laid the bundle on my bed. The sight of the fragile bones filled me with a profound sense of sorrow. This was a child, a life cut short, a soul trapped in this house for decades. I owed it to him to give him a proper burial, to finally allow him to rest in peace. The next morning, I confided in Sarah about my discovery in the attic. Her eyes widened in shock as I recounted the events of the night before. Together, we decided to do what was right for Thomas. We found a small, secluded clearing in the woods behind the house, a peaceful spot where the sun dappled through the leaves and birdsong filled the air. We dug a small grave, our hands careful and respectful. As we gently laid the bundle of bones to rest, a sense of calm settled over me. Sarah had brought a small bouquet of wildflowers, which we placed on the freshly turned earth. We stood in silence for a moment, paying our respects to the young boy who had finally found peace. As we turned to leave, I felt a gentle breeze brush against my cheek, and I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper carried on the wind, a whisper that seemed to say, "Thank you." The days that followed were filled with a sense of closure and a newfound peace. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the house seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of tranquility. I no longer felt the chilling presence that had haunted me for years. The nightmares ceased, and the unsettling incidents stopped. I knew that Thomas was finally at rest, his spirit freed from the confines of the house. And I, in helping him find peace, had finally found my own. The experience had changed me. I no longer sought out the paranormal with the same fervor as before. I had learned that some mysteries are best left undisturbed, some doors best left unopened. But I also learned the importance of compassion, of helping those in need, even if they are no longer part of this world. And though the memory of the haunting still lingered, it no longer filled me with fear. Instead, it served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, the power of empathy, and the enduring hope for peace, even in the face of darkness. It begins 12 minutes after midnight. I think something went wrong when I was born, though my parents always told me it was fine, other than being so close to Christmas. They didn't want a child born near Christmas, afraid it would be overshadowed by the holiday. They let me do whatever I wanted for my birthday. Slumber parties with 20 friends, anything. But the night before my birthday, that was different. That was for me and me alone. I couldn't let anyone know about the 12 minutes after midnight, the 12 minutes leading up to the moment of my birth. 12 minutes in which I didn't exist. The day of my birth, but not yet the moment. A strange void where I was and was not. I can't explain where I got that idea. It's always been there. A chilling certainty etched into my mind since I first formed memories. I remember trying to tell my classmates once about everything that happens in those 12 minutes. Their laughter stung, a sharp lesson in keeping my terrors to myself. My earliest memory is a suffocating one, the weight of blankets pressing down on me, the darkness absolute, the heat of my own body trapped beneath the covers. I held the edges down with both hands, desperate to keep them out, even though I knew it was already too late. They were always there, waiting for those 12 minutes to begin. It felt like an eternity, that struggle in the dark. Now, I know it only lasted 12 minutes. As I got older, hiding wasn't enough. In 3rd grade, they found me. A hand, inhuman and angular, reached through the blankets. It had no color, no depth, like a cutout against the dim light. I cried out as its icy grip closed around my wrist, a weak, strangled sound lost in the terror that choked me. They dragged me from the bed, and I stumbled onto the floor. The darkness wasn't just under the blankets anymore. It clung to the walls, stretched across the floor, leaving me stranded on a narrow island of carpet. Dozens of hands, all sharp angles and impossible joints, reached out from the void. I clawed at the bed frame, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. They were weak then, those hands, and I managed to hold on until the clock ticked past midnight, and they vanished. Sobbing, I told my parents, my father, after a cursory search of the locked house, dismissed it as a nightmare. Like my classmates, my parents taught me to stay silent. Their evasiveness about my birth made me think they knew that they wouldn't or couldn't help. By 8th grade, holding my ground wasn't enough. They were getting stronger. I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the clock tick towards midnight, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Happy birthday," I whispered as December 20th began, and the shadows started to creep across the walls. The 12 minutes in which I didn't exist, and the void came to claim me. They surrounded me, and I rose to meet them. Icy fingers closed around my arms and legs, pulling me towards the edge of the darkness. My feet stumbled, and panic flared in my chest. Was this it? Would I fall into that nothingness and cease to exist? My breath came in ragged gasps, my lungs burning. In a frenzy, I lashed out, slapping at the hands, then forming a fist and striking. One hand shattered, like glass, splintering on the floor. A surge of desperate hope coursed through me. I fought, with a ferocity born of fear, and they retreated as the clock struck 12. I sat on my bed, trembling, for hours. Shingles bloomed across my skin a week later, a manifestation of the stress that also brought my first ever D on a report card. My parents, oblivious, blamed the recent move and grounded me. Resentment curdled in my gut, and I vowed to never speak of it again. The splinters started cutting me in high school. I learned to wrap my hands in medical tape. In college, I bought a baseball bat, smuggling it into my childhood bedroom during winter break. I wondered if my roommate would see the darkness too, but I never dared to find out. I've kept everyone at a distance, convinced that I'm cursed. My parents, with their carefully constructed normalcy, had their secrets, and so did I, but after a particularly brutal encounter, where I felt the chill of the void against my back as they dragged me closer to the edge, I decided to uncover the truth. I started with my birth certificate. I snatched the death certificate from the envelope, my fingers trembling. The paper felt brittle and cold, like touching a tombstone. It was real. My death certificate. Same town. Same date. My name. 12 a.m. Was I stillborn? Was this the reason for those 12 minutes? My soul clawing its way back from oblivion, fighting for the right to exist? Or was it something more sinister? The grave's annual attempt to reclaim what was rightfully its own? A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I sank into a chair, the death certificate fluttering to the floor like a fallen leaf. My parents, with their forced cheerfulness and carefully constructed normalcy, had been lying to me my entire life. What else were they hiding? The question swirled in my head, unanswered and unanswerable. I had my answer, a horrifying confirmation of my deepest fears, but it only deepened the mystery. The car chase last year had been a desperate gamble, a frantic attempt to outrun the inevitable. The darkness had seeped into the car, tendrils snaking around the edges of the windshield, transforming into skeletal fingers reaching for me, their touch promising oblivion. I had spun the wheel, crashing into a streetlight, the impact jarring me to my core. I scrambled out of the car, their icy grip tearing at my shirt, the world fading to gray, and then it was over. I lay gasping on the asphalt, my back scraped and bleeding, the taste of blood filling my mouth. The car was dented but drivable. I made it home, the silence of the empty house pressing down on me. Standing under the scalding shower, I watched the blood swirl down the drain, a grim reminder of my yearly battle. My friend's daughter, with the brutal honesty of children, had inadvertently given me a chilling perspective. Grown-ups don't count half years because we're closer to dying. Every year, I was closer to death. And every year, the void grew stronger, its grasp more tenacious. This year, I wouldn't fight. I would run. I had been training for months, pushing my body to its limits, focusing on speed, not endurance. 12 minutes. That's all I needed to outrun them. My running clothes were already on, the fabric cold against my skin. The running shoes felt heavy, a tangible reminder of the desperate race I was about to run. Hours stretched ahead, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against my dwindling courage. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. Fear, a cold, suffocating blanket, settled over me. Was this my last sunset? Would I see the dawn? I glanced at the clock. 11:45 p.m. Time to go. I slipped out of the house, the night air biting into my lungs. The streets were empty, the houses dark. The world held its breath, waiting. 11:55 p.m. I started running. The first minute was a blur of pounding feet and ragged breaths. Street lights flickered past, casting elongated shadows that danced and twisted like mocking specters. The cold night air stung my lungs, and my muscles burned with the exertion. But fear lent me speed, a primal urgency that propelled me forward. 2 minutes. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The darkness was there, a swirling mass of shadows slithering down the street, gaining on me. Panic clawed at my throat, but I pushed it down, focusing on the rhythm of my stride, the pounding of my heart. 3 minutes. My lungs screamed for air, my legs heavy and leaden. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. The houses lining the street were dark, lifeless eyes watching my desperate flight. 4 minutes. The darkness was closer now, a suffocating presence that chilled me to the bone. I could hear the whisper of movement, the slithering sound of those countless hands reaching for me. 5 minutes. I burst into a park, the open space offering a momentary illusion of freedom. But the darkness followed, seeping through the trees, casting twisted shadows across the grass. 6 minutes. My vision blurred, my body screaming in protest. But I couldn't give up. I had to keep running, for my life. 7 minutes. I stumbled, my ankle twisting beneath me. Pain shot through my leg, but I scrambled back to my feet, driven by a desperate surge of adrenaline. 8 minutes. The darkness was upon me, tendrils of shadow wrapping around my legs, trying to drag me down. I kicked, thrashed, my heart pounding like a drum. 9 minutes. I could feel their icy grip on my arms, pulling me back into the suffocating embrace of the void. The world tilted, the ground rushing up to meet me. 10 minutes. My fingers scraped against the asphalt, desperate for purchase. I clawed, kicked, fought with a ferocity born of pure terror. 11 minutes. The darkness enveloped me, the cold seeping into my bones. I could feel myself slipping away, the world fading to gray. 12 minutes. A blinding flash of light, a deafening roar, and then silence. I lay on my back, gasping for air, the taste of ozone thick in my mouth. The park was bathed in an eerie glow, the shadows retreating, the darkness banished. I was alive. I had outrun them. But as I slowly sat up, my body aching, my mind reeling, I saw a figure standing in the distance, silhouetted against the fading light. It was tall and slender, with long, flowing hair and wings. The figure turned, and I saw its face. It was beautiful, ethereal, with eyes that shimmered like distant stars. And it was smiling. "You have done well," the figure said, its voice a melodic whisper that echoed through the stillness. "But the race is not over. It never is." And then it was gone, vanished into the dawn light. I was left alone, trembling, with the lingering echo of its words and a chilling certainty that my fight for existence was far from over. The Ouija board spelled out a chilling message. "One of you is not who you say you are." My blood ran cold. I'd spent my whole life seeking out the supernatural, but nothing could have prepared me for this. It all started innocently enough. My friends and I, drawn by the eerie reputation of our small town in Salem, Massachusetts, decided to try a Ouija board for the first time. We weren't interested in following the rules. We just wanted to see what would happen. The setup. We found an abandoned treehouse nestled deep in the woods. The perfect setting for our spooky experiment. The air was thick with the smell of damp leaves and decaying wood, and the only sounds were the rustling of branches and the distant hooting of an owl. With candles casting flickering shadows and a sense of anticipation hanging heavy in the air, we placed our hands on the planchette. At first, nothing happened. We asked questions, but the planchette remained stubbornly still. "Is there a spirit with us?" we asked. Silence. "What is your name?" We tried again. Nothing. Disappointed. We decided to tell scary stories instead, leaving the Ouija board out just in case. First contact. During a lull in the conversation, I decided to give it another try. Alone, I whispered to the board, "Will you please grace us with your presence tonight?" To my surprise, the planchette started moving. It glided across the board, spelling out a single word. Yes, excited. I called my friends back. We huddled around the board, eager for answers. But as soon as we all placed our hands on the planchette, it stopped moving. Confused, I suggested we try it one at a time. Growing unease, Chad went first. He asked, "Where are you from?" His eyes widened as the planchette spelled out, "Not important." Then it was my turn. "Why are you only responding when it's one of us using the board?" I asked. The answer came swiftly. One at a time, the air grew thick with tension. Ashley and Josh looked pale, but Chad was still eager to see where this would lead. One by one, my friends climbed down from the treehouse, leaving me alone with the Ouija board and a growing sense of dread. I asked the spirit about my death. It replied with a cryptic "depends." Then, "What is your name?" I tried to lie, but it saw right through me. "Do not lie." I answered truthfully, and it continued with a series of personal questions. My favorite food, my biggest fear. Each answer seemed to fuel its interest. Finally, it instructed me to send Ashley up to the treehouse. Ashley's turn. Ashley's session was short and unsettling. She came down looking shaken, saying the spirit had only asked her personal questions. Josh's turn. Josh's session was even longer and more disturbing. He emerged from the treehouse pale and silent, clearly shaken by the experience. Chad's turn. Then it was Chad's turn. He climbed up to the treehouse, and we waited anxiously below. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, he came down, his face etched with fear. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice trembling. Now, he refused to answer our questions, packing his bag and heading into the woods. Ashley and Josh, equally spooked, followed close behind. I hesitated, despite the fear gnawing at me. I felt a strange compulsion to stay. This was the supernatural encounter I'd always craved. The truth revealed. Alone in the treehouse, I placed my hand on the planchette. "Why are you asking us all these questions?" I asked. The answer came slowly. Tio confirmed my suspicions. "Confirm your suspicions of what?" The planchette moved again. "One of you is not who you say you are." Before I could react, blood-curdling screams echoed through the forest. The planchette flew across the board. "That is not Chad. He is coming back for you. Run." Panic surged through me. I scrambled down from the treehouse and fled into the darkness, the screams of my friends echoing behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of town. I never saw my friends again. The small town of Salem, with its haunted reputation, holds a dark secret, and I'm left with a chilling question. Who or what was Chad? I'm never going near a Ouija board again. My grandma, bless her soul, was a real character, loud fun, and always ready with a handful of butterscotch candies and a fierce defense whenever I got in trouble. But more than anything, I loved her stories. She had a whole arsenal of them. Tales of growing up during World War II, escapades with her friends on the California coast after her family relocated, stories that made me laugh, and stories that made me cry. But the ones that truly captivated me, the ones that sent shivers down my spine, were her ghost stories. Grandma had dabbled in the occult as a teenager, exploring the mysteries of Ouija boards, tarot cards, and fortune-telling. Most of her spooky tales I'd brush off with a laugh, but a few truly stuck with me. I was just 10 when she came to live with us after Grandpa passed, and she had a way of making those stories feel real, especially in the hushed darkness of my room, with only the faint moonlight filtering through the blinds. She'd sit close, her peppermint breath mingling with the scent of old books, her piercing blue eyes holding mine captive. Years later, only one of those chilling tales remains vivid in my memory, the story of the shower and Mr. Longfingers. It all started one evening when I asked Grandma about her long, luxurious baths. She'd spend hours soaking in the tub, surrounded by flickering candles and fragrant incense, much to my mom's annoyance. "It's the only place I feel truly safe," she'd explain, her voice low and serious. "People like me, sensitive to the unseen, we have to be careful. Taking a shower is far too risky." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I knew a story was coming, one of the spine-chilling ones. I snuggled deeper under the covers, a delicious thrill of fear running through me. "Why risky, Grandma?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She turned towards a window, her gaze fixed on the shadows dancing in the moonlight. "It's only risky if you close your eyes," she said finally, "for longer than 10 seconds. "What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "You know that game you play at recess, where someone turns around and the others try to sneak up on them?" I nodded, and she continued, "It's like that in the shower when you close your eyes. That's when Mr. Longfingers comes." An icy chill ran down my back. "Who's Mr. Longfingers?" She sighed, as if regretting having brought it up. "Nobody knows for sure," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "Some say he's a creature drawn to the warmth and scent of humans. Others say he's a demon that slips into our world through the steam. But no one who's actually seen him can tell you. Why not?" I breathed, my heart pounding in my chest. Grandma leaned closer, her eyes boring into mine. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about that, sweetheart. Just remember the rules, and you'll be fine." "What rules?" "Never close your eyes in the shower for too long. 5 seconds is okay. 10 is pushing it. But any longer, what happens then? You might start to feel something in there with you, watching you. And if you go longer than 15 seconds, you might hear it." "Hear what?" "The soft tap, tap, tap of fingers on a glass door. If you ever hear that, God forbid, promise me you'll never open your eyes." That night, sleep was a distant dream. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured a grotesque face pressed against my window, peering in with hungry eyes. When I finally drifted off, nightmares plagued me. Visions of disembodied eyes glowing in the darkness, long, skeletal fingers reaching out to caress my skin. Even when awake, I couldn't escape the chilling grip of Grandma's story. The shower, once a place of comfort, became a source of terror. I'd stand under the warm spray, shampoo stinging my eyes, and the moment I closed them, Grandma's words would echo in my mind. 5 seconds is okay. 10 is pushing it. A sense of dread would wash over me, a feeling of being watched, of something unseen lurking just beyond my perception. I'd frantically scrub my hair, counting the seconds, desperate to open my eyes and break the spell. The reddish-black darkness behind my eyelids, coupled with the roar of the water, felt suffocating, like the silence before a scream. I'd often rip my eyes open before rinsing the shampoo completely, just to escape the suffocating fear. But before closing them again, I'd always glance at the steamy glass door of the shower, just to make sure I was alone. It wasn't long before my mom noticed something was wrong. She heard me crying out in my sleep one night and came to comfort me. Between sobs, I confessed about Grandma's stories, about Mr. Longfingers. A look of fury crossed her face, the kind I usually received after some particularly mischievous act. But this time, her anger wasn't directed at me. It was aimed at Grandma. Later that night, I pressed my ear against the wall separating my room from my parents. Usually, their voices were hushed whispers, but tonight, their conversation was sharp and clear. "You know what your mother's done now, Simon," Mom hissed. "She's told him there's a monster that'll get him if he closes his eyes in the shower. The poor kid's been having nightmares all week. You need to talk to her first thing tomorrow, or I will." The next evening, Grandma visited me. This time, There were no stories, no chilling tales. She just sat on the edge of my bed, her blue eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. The moonlight illuminated the lines etched on her face, making her look older, more fragile. "You know I'd never let anything bad happen to you, don't you?" she said softly. "I know, Grandma," I replied, my voice small. "You know I wouldn't let you come to any harm." I nodded. "Good," she said, her gaze drifting towards a window. "The things I tell you, they're meant to help you, sweetheart, to toughen you up, protect you." She paused, a sigh escaping her lips. "But maybe your mom's right. Maybe I went too far this time." A weak smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Tell you what," she said, her voice regaining some of its usual strength, "about Mr. Longfingers. I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'll scare the bastard off. He won't come back in a hurry after facing me." I stared at her, a glimmer of hope flickering in my chest. I nodded slowly. It was a week later, in the pre-dawn chill, that I woke with a start. A heavy thump resonated through the silent house, jolting me upright in bed. My room was still, and no sound came from my parents' room next door. But then I heard it, the distinct rush of water, the shower running. A primal fear gripped me, a cold dread I couldn't explain. I scrambled out of bed and sprinted down the hallway, my heart pounding like a drum. Reaching the bathroom door, I banged frantically, yelling, "Grandma, Grandma," but there was no answer. I could hear my parents stirring in their room, their sleepy voices muffled by the walls. But before they could reach me, I instinctively reached for the doorknob, not expecting it to turn. To my surprise, it was unlocked. The door swung inward, releasing a wave of steam that enveloped me. I shielded my eyes from the thick fog and peered into the bathroom. And then I saw her. Grandma lay naked on the shower floor, the water cascading over her lifeless body. Her blue eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. One hand was clutched against her chest, while the other was outstretched, leaving streaks on the stained glass door. My father rushed past me, pushing me aside. The world dissolved into a blur of shouts, tears, and panicked movements. Later, Dad told me she had died of a heart attack. It was quick, he said, painless. She wouldn't have suffered, but even as a 10-year-old, I knew better. And now, years later, the truth remains etched in my memory. My wife and children don't understand my aversion to showers. They humor my insistence on baths, but I can see the judgment in their eyes. My wife believes it's trauma from finding Grandma, and she's partly right. But she doesn't know the whole truth. No one does. Because the reason I haven't taken a shower since that day isn't just a memory of my grandmother's lifeless body. It's what I saw when I crept back into the bathroom after the paramedics had taken her away. I examined the marks her fingers had left on the stained glass door, and those marks weren't just on the inside. "Babe, you're such a goofball," Sarah chuckled, pulling her fiery red hair into a messy bun, her emerald eyes sparkling with amusement. She swatted my hand away from her, a playful smirk on her lips. "Hands off the merchandise, mister." "Ah, come on, Sarah," I whined, feigning innocence. If I'm a goofball, what does that make you? The goofball's girlfriend, she shot back, her quick wit never failing to make me grin. We both dissolved into laughter, the sound echoing through our cozy apartment in downtown Austin. I hopped off the bed and strolled into the living room, the familiar scent of Sarah's lavender candles filling the air. I flicked on the TV, landing on the local news channel. And in a shocking turn of events, rising star Sarah O'Connell has landed the lead role in Steven Spielberg's latest sci-fi thriller. The news anchor announced, a picture of Sarah flashing across the screen. My jaw dropped. Sarah, my Sarah, a movie star? This had to be some kind of elaborate prank. Sarah was a talented graphic designer, not an actress. She hated being the center of attention, always blushing at the slightest compliment. Sarah, you gotta see this. I yelled, my voice laced with disbelief. We huddled together on the couch, rewinding the news report over and over again. A quick Google search confirmed it wasn't a hoax. Sarah's face was plastered all over the internet, IMDb, Variety, even TMZ. There were photos of her at red carpet events, movie premieres, even a childhood headshot from some long-forgotten commercial. It was like she'd been living a double life, a secret Hollywood career I knew nothing about. Sarah was in shock, her face pale, her hands trembling. This can't be real, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I've never even been to an audition. Her phone started buzzing incessantly with calls from unknown numbers. She ignored them, her eyes fixated on the screen, watching her own face in disbelief. As the day wore on, the situation spiraled into a surreal nightmare. A Wikipedia page materialized, detailing a long list of film and TV credits, awards, and even a scandalous secret relationship with some A-list actor I'd never heard of. It was as if someone had rewritten Sarah's history, erasing her real life and replacing it with a fabricated Hollywood persona. Jason, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, I'm scared. I pulled her close, trying to offer comfort, but the fear in her eyes mirrored my own. We were trapped in a bizarre, inexplicable situation, and I had no idea how to get us out of it. Then, the breaking news alert flashed across the screen. Austin woman claims identity theft by rising star Sarah O'Connell. It was my turn to be terrified. They were calling Sarah an imposter, a fraud. The real Sarah O'Connell, they claimed, was a struggling actress from Los Angeles who had mysteriously disappeared a few months ago. The accusations escalated quickly. The media painted Sarah as a manipulative con artist, a master of disguise who had stolen someone else's life. The police were on their way, ready to arrest her for identity theft. We have to get out of here, I said, my voice urgent. Now, we grabbed a few essentials and slipped out the back door, leaving behind the life we knew, the life that had been stolen from us. We were on the run, fugitives in a world that no longer recognized us.